Our 1000th episode is coming out in June. Can you believe it? I want you to be a part of it. Will you leave a voicemail about one of your favorite things from the podcast? I want to know specifics. Was there an episode that you will forever remember? Was there a tip that one of the guests said? Or was there a shift in your brain when you said, I got to go into private practice? I would love for you to leave me a voicemail for the 1000th episode that we're going to air in June. Just head on over to practiceofthepractice.com/voicemail to leave a voicemail for the 1000th episode. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 986. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. I am so excited that you are here. We hang out with business leaders, professionals, clinical directors, people that know all sorts of stuff to help you build a thriving practice you absolutely love. We want that thriving side, that you're actually making ends meet, you're making money, you're rocking out private practice, but that you love it, that you don't kind of sell your soul in the middle of building a business, that we have lots of ways in the world that we could make money, but we might as well do it in a way that we absolutely love. And so that's what we do here 3 to 4 times a week. We are now on episode 986. The 1000th episode is coming in early June. And don't forget that you can still leave us a voicemail over at practiceofthepractice.com/voicemail. You're welcome to say congrats, but actually what I would rather have is, was there an episode that just stands out to you, that you were on a walk and you still remember that place? I know I have podcasts that I listened to, like Chris Ducker, Pat Flynn, a number of people early on, that there were moments. I can still picture this moment by a marina that Chris Ducker was talking about how to itemize things and decide what to outsource. And it was such a mind shift for me. Have you experienced that through the podcast? If so, we want to hear about it. Leave us a short 90-second voicemail over at practiceofthepractice.com/voicemail. And we're going to incorporate a lot of those into our 1000th episode. Also, we rarely ask you for reviews, but we are shooting for 1,000 reviews by our 1000th episode. So make sure you, wherever you listen to your podcast, make sure you review us over there. You know, it's interesting. Just last night, I was talking, with someone at my improv group as we were getting going. We were talking about play. We were talking about all sorts of things in regards to why play matters and things like that. And that is why I'm so excited, because this is something that happens in my life all the time. I have a 9-year-old and 12-year-old. We play a lot. We go outside. We go for hikes. We do ridiculous things, and we also just live our lives. And Erin Diehl is a business improv edutainer, a failfluencer, and a professional Zombie. Through a series of unrelated dares, Erin created Improve It, a unique professional development company rooted in improv comedy that pushes leaders and teams to laugh, learn, play, and grow. Erin, welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast.
I am thrilled to be here, Joe. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to see where we take this conversation. Let's do it.
Yeah. Well, I just want to start with, have you always been someone that plays, or was this something you had to kind of rediscover in adulthood?
Oh, Joe, I know. I love we're going right to childhood. I love that. So I have been playing pretend since I was 3. And I say that I'm a professional pretender. Like that is my real role. I remember playing I don't know if you remember the show on Nickelodeon, Double Dare, with Mark Summers. And if you didn't get the answer right, you would get slimed. I would play this in my parents' living room, but I was Mark Summers and I would slime everybody. And I had an imaginary friend named Friend Jeff at the time as well. So I've always had this very vivid imagination. And I always did dance. I danced starting at the age of 3. I always did theater starting at the age of 4. And, I dabbled in show choir. I wasn't that great of a singer, but dance and sketch comedy and acting were really my favorite things. And so I knew that that was my path. I found great joy in making other people laugh through play. And I found myself at certain times in my life not using that creative muscle. And that wasn't the best, use of me. That wasn't the best use of my talents. And so when I was sort of out of alignment with who I truly feel like I'm here to be, I didn't serve the world or myself in any way, shape, or form. So I have really known since a young age that I was meant to be a teacher and a performer.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting how, some of us, like have that when we're really like young. And then I got messages from, a lot of different sources saying like you have to have a practical career.
Mhm.
And thinking about, okay, well, psychology, like my dad did that, and how do I make that my own? So I wanted to do like the wilderness therapy route for a while, and then all these other different things. Um, how did you, during those kind of like formative years of when you're deciding on a career, whether that's like college in your 20s, when you started to think about the practicality of play, like how did that keep peppering itself into your work, or did you find that you had periods of time that you went farther away from that kind of playfulness?
Such a good question. And I will tell you, I have to really credit my parents for just not negating me in any way, shape, or form. When I was 13 years old, I remember this very vividly. Just as you were describing, like where you were when you listened to that podcast, right? Like I remember being 13 years old, being sick, home from school, sitting on my parents' like 90s floral couch in their living room, and I turned on the Oprah Winfrey show and I just sat up. I was wearing a pair of like ratty pajamas from the Delia's catalog, which was like this 90s magazine. Okay. And I sat up and I was just like, oh my God, she makes people feel good. And she's doing things that spark joy. I love this. And so then I literally, this was back in the days, like, when you just had internet that was like a snap, crackle, pop, like the modem, and I would come home from school, and as soon as I could, like, load up our AOL, I would Google, "How do I become Oprah Winfrey?" So I knew that I loved that she was this talk show host that infused joy and play into her show. She had some really real conversations, but I knew that the root of my play was making other people feel good. Like, I knew that. And I just didn't know how to channel that. And so my parents, I told them from 13 on, like even going to college, I'm going to be a talk show host. Like I literally said that. And they never said, no, you're not. There was a period in time my dad was like, you should have a plan B. And I go, okay, dad, and I just sort of waved it off. But they never told me I couldn't. And that in improv is called yes and. Like they yes anded me my entire life and told me that if anybody could do it, it would be me because I would annoy somebody until I got it and made it happen. And that's actually the truth. Like I've had this persistence in my bones since I was young. And so I really credit the fact that I didn't deviate from this goal to my parents because they always believed in me. And then when I said, "Hey, I'm gonna start a business that uses play," they were like, "Go for it." And, my dad's an entrepreneur. He's always had an entrepreneurial spirit. I think that sort of came to me as well. And my mom, taught voice and piano lessons out of my house growing up, and it was on a community theater stage her entire life. And so I grew up with both in my family. My parents with my dad with the entrepreneurial business side and my mom with the creative acting and arts side. And so I feel really lucky that I really never felt like I had to deviate from that.
Hmm. Now, working with companies, corporations, teams, I'm sure you identify whether we call them like mental roadblocks or just like ways of thinking, like whatever we label it, that stand in the way of the very thing that you were taught as a kid and that maybe you also have naturally. Like, what are the things that for you stand in the way of adults playing, adults in the workplace, having a lighter attitude, like all those things that you teach through your business? Like, what are those kind of big roadblocks that you see with the average team?
Yeah. A lot of people are ready to jump in and they're excited to do something different. But then you have usually the people who have the biggest egos and haven't learned how to lead from a place of a higher consciousness. have a very hard time being vulnerable. And I always say people were wearing masks to work prior to 2020. That was actually a revelation for a lot of people because we got to drop this facade of now I'm my work self. And we saw people as who they are in their homes with their children with photos behind them on Zoom. We were able to really see humans for humans beings, not humans doing. And for me, it's really getting, if I can find a small champion in the room, what happens is, and there's a saying in improv that if you're not having fun, you're the jerk, or you can use another word if you want. And so it's almost like you see this group of people having a great time. If you're not dropping your ego and playing along, then it's your own fault. You're not allowing yourself to play. And I think what really happens is we find people who don't want to look uncomfortable in front of their peers, people who don't want to drop their work facade, and they stand out because everybody else is doing so. And so for me, when I witness that in real time, I give that person a lot of grace because I know this is my day to day. This is my team's day to day. This is not their day to day. And so I just send them love in my body, like in my energy. I'm just sending them love. I'm sending them love. I'm not calling them out or pushing them way beyond their comfort zone. I let them dip their own toe. And then usually by the end, they've started to let go a little bit and they've started to release and have a lot of fun. And they question themselves like, why was I handing or standing back? Why wasn't I diving in? And it's a really interesting thing to watch because the dynamics of the room, the energy is so positive, especially with improv and just how we teach. We are guiding you outside of your comfort zone in this gentle hug. Like we're doing it with so much love. We're not there to embarrass anyone, but it definitely is harder for some than it is for others.
Mm. It kind of reminds me of early in my career, I got really into high ropes courses and kind of low ropes initiatives and kind of teaching really at risk kids some of these team building activities. We did a therapeutic sailing program for a while where we took these at risk kids out on this 50-foot wooden sailboat and taught them how to run it and all these kind of experiential ways of learning and thinking. And I would imagine sometimes it's similar when you're coming into a company or a team, and some people are totally bought in, and then some people are like, "Man, my boss is making me come here."
Yeah.
When you think about therapists listening that have this bend towards play, improv, team building, helping grow the way that teams operate, like what opportunities are out there in regards to taking that skill set that's often only in a session with maybe a family or a couple or individuals and bringing that to teams?
Yeah. So I think, I have a therapist. I'm a big component of therapy, always have been. And she's actually a play therapist. She uses play in a lot of her teaching and her work. And her and I've had many conversations about this because she also has a theater background. That's why I was drawn to her. I knew I needed an outside of the box therapist to work with. And
And you're talking play therapy with adults, not just with kids, and then she just does talk therapy with you.
yeah, yeah, right, right. She does.
Okay.
Yes. So, and she and I will, we'll kind of act out certain things together, or she'll have me do forward thinking or past thinking, and I use a lot of DMR with her, and so it's a really interesting way to think about. Okay, I'm doing this one on one with her. So really, and I mentioned this to you earlier, what we do in a team setting is we are taking, instead of talk therapy, we're experiencing the feelings that we want them to talk about out loud in real time. So we do activities as a group that allow them to get to this certain place. So here's an example. Let's say a team is having trouble with communication And specifically, let's say, we've heard that there's a lot of nonverbal communication happening. People are showing up and they just look like they don't want to be there. They're showing up on Zoom it could be Zoom or in the room, wherever it may be. There's an activity we use called gibberish, which I actually absolutely love. And if you're an improviser, Joe, you might have done this before, but it involves everyone on the team walking around the room, saying hello to one another in gibberish. Then we go to the next round, which is you still use gibberish, but you greet each other like your long lost best friends. And then you do it again, and you're greeting each other as if you're worst enemies, still in gibberish. And then finally, you're greeting each other as if you're somebody that you greatly respect. So if I see you, it's like I might bow to you. I might do a hands in prayer and sort of bow that way. I might shake your hand, but we're still speaking, but we're using a made up language. And so that's fun. It gets really heightened. People laugh, right? But the goal of that, once I start to debrief that with the group, is number one, how did it feel to communicate using a made up language? Well, it was silly, but I used my body. Okay, so did you just realize that you just told four completely different stories using your body? If you couldn't even speak, we could tell from your body language what your energy was or what the intention behind that communication was. And so that's how we infuse it with groups and play. And we have so many group based activities that we do that we can pull from based on any given challenge or problem that a client or a team has. So it's taking it and making sure that the team dynamics are cohesive, not just the individual. And that is really a game changer because it's a conversation starter and it gets people really thinking about how they show up on a day-to-day basis.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. Now, I'm interested as therapists are thinking about, oh wait, I have these skills in the office. If they want to start connecting with local businesses or doing more trainings, what would be some first steps that they could replicate that you did to start to get out and get some of the first trainings?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, for what we would do, and I say this is basically play therapy, you would have to contact the HR departments because HR is usually who a team leader will go to if there's some type of issue, right? So, it's either an HR leader, a learning and development leader, talent development, chief people officer, anybody who deals with people inside of an organization. And for me, I was very lucky because I worked in recruiting prior to building Improve It. And I had a lot of relationships with HR leaders because most of my recruiting days, I was at a recruiting agency. We recruited for administrative roles and backfill office positions. So we were always working with HR. So I went straight to my network first. But an easy thing to do is in your community, find an HR association like Society of Human Resources Management or SHRM. There's ATD, which is oh my gosh, ATD, Talent Development, Association of Talent Development. And you can look in your region or even join the Chamber of Commerce to see what businesses exist and then start reaching out. You can do emails. I believe cold calling is dead, but really it's relationship building and trust with HR leaders because you have to think about this when you do this type of work inside of a group at a corporation or a small business. You're asking for productivity to be halted for the amount of time that you're there. You need the person who is leading it, the client, to trust you. And so I always say this is a really high touch business. No one's ever going to book a workshop or a keynote without talking to somebody on my team first. So being open to conversations, it may take time to build that trust. You might have to take that person to coffee or have several meetings, but it does pan out. It just takes a lot of drops in the bucket, a lot of conversations usually to make it happen to establish that trust first. And then you've built the relationship and they'll come back to you time and time again.
Mm, so awesome. As a therapist, I can tell you from experience that having the right EHR is an absolute lifeline. I recommend using therapy notes. They make billing, scheduling, note taking, telehealth, and e prescribe incredibly easy. Best of all, they offer live telephone support that's available 7 days a week. You don't have to take my word for it. Do your own research and see for yourself. Therapy Notes is the #1 highest rated EHR system available today, with a 4.9 out of 5 stars on trustpilot.com and on Google. All you have to do is click the link below or type promo code Joe on their website over at therapynotes.com and receive a special 2-month trial absolutely free. Again, that's therapynotes.com and use promo code Joe on the website. If you're coming from another EHR, Therapy Notes will also import your demographic data quick and easy at no cost, so you can get started right away. Trust me, don't waste any more of your time and try Therapy Notes. Just use promo code Joe at checkout. Now, what are some of the skills that you draw on when you're working with teams? Like, what are some examples of some of the other activities that you do with them?
Yeah. So we have actually 10 different soft skill training workshops. And they're really, we've expanded them over time to be complete experiences. So I'm going to tell you about those different offerings and then I can give you a specific example of an activity. But they range from team building, effective communication, presentation skills, networking, leadership. We have a career 101 workshop for early career people. We have a sales training. We have a thinking quickly on your feet, taking initiative and creative risks. And then the final one is vision setting. So if you're setting goals for the year ahead or the next quarter, and then every workshop has pre work to it now. So we actually have 22 improv professionals from all over the US, mostly Chicago, New York, LA, because that's where improv professionals live.
Yeah.
Um,
I did a intensive at Annoyance last summer for a week, and I just
yes,
wanna move down to Chicago and do more of those, so
that's where I lived for 15 years, and Annoyance was where I
Are you
found
kidding
my
me?
yeah, I found my voice at
Ah.
Annoyance. I love Annoyance so
Let's
much.
just do a quick side thing there. So to me, what I love about Annoyance's philosophy that to me is very different, and to be able to like learn from Mick and everybody there was just
Mhm.
incredible. But you know, to be able to have your character you come in with and hold that viewpoint. So often
Yes.
in improv, people are like, yes, and you get these two characters that are like the same character. You're both excited about getting on a bus or whatever. Instead of, okay, I'm coming in as a disgruntled post office worker and this other person's coming in as a happy stay-at-home mom, and it's
Yes.
like, okay, what would happen if those two have a scene? It's so much more interesting than just like the typical, like, I just love that philosophy.
Me too, and it was the last school that I trained with, and I wish it was the
Mm.
first because I have a tendency to play really big characters, and, like, that's their whole thing is stick to your stuff, you know? And I wish that I started there, but it kind of rounded out all of my training because it was so awesome. It's such a freeing place. There's less of an agenda there than I find at other schools, and it's more about the play. Did you ever have Susan Messing as a teacher?
Mhm. Yeah,
Ah,
yeah.
the
We
best.
Oh my gosh. So Susan, we actually went down as a whole team from Traverse City. So we're like 5 hours away from Chicago. We
Yeah,
went down on a Thursday night and did all day Friday, all day Saturday, and had like a half a day with 4 different teachers. And Susan was one of them. And I loved her. She was just like so practical and interesting and just like, oh, so much.
so good. So, so good. And it's such a good school of thought, but all of my facilitators, they're working actors. They've
Mm.
trained at all of these schools. We have people that are on stage at ETC and main stage at Second City. They're on boats, they're on tour companies. We've got people who are teachers at Second City. Like they know the work, they know improv, and they know how to put it into context in a corporate setting. And so we've been around for 10 years. And I will tell you that we've all evolved as humans, but the core of who we are still remains. And I really believe that the qualities of a great improviser make up the qualities of a great human. And so they're just these really great people who truly care about helping other people through play. And it's awesome. I mean, we've all grown, we've all had kids, we've got married. Like I've witnessed all of our life's, milestones with our team. And the reason actually that we have teams in New York and LA is because we started with this big group of people in Chicago, and actors just migrate to New York and LA. So now we've got small teams there as well. But we do a lot of work on the West Coast and on the East Coast. So it's great. And it's been a really interesting experience. I know I got away from your original question, which I'm trying to think. What I was talking
Yeah.
about the pre-work and then the
Yeah.
live work, and then we have an e-learning course built in conjunction with everything we do as well. Every single workshop has its own pre-work and comedic video showing you how not to do the skill that we're about to teach you on. And then there is a survey built into that we ask participants to take so we can get really specific on what they want to achieve, what their challenges are. And then the e-learning is the response to clients saying, well, this was an amazing live session. Now what? So it continues the learning for 3 weeks post workshop. That was all built over time. I mean, this has been 10 years in the making. So it really is an experience, but we've just listened and built on what teams and leaders need. And that's how it's all come together.
Mm. Now, I would love to kind of switch to hear for you, how does play like interact in your own life? You and I were talking, you have a son, I have two daughters. How does that look as a parent? How does that look as someone that, when you're working, even if you're doing play, I'm sure you enjoy your work, but it's still, at the end of the week, you probably don't want to do the same work. You don't want to work all the time. Like, what does play and creativity look like for your personal life?
Such a great question. Okay. So I sit in my little podcast studio, which is a closet that I converted into a studio. And I have a vision board behind my laptop here. And my word of the year is play, funny enough. I always set a one word intention for the year. And I have play looking at me in giant letters right now. So it's ironic and awesome that you asked that. And here's what happened. I had a baby in 2019, and then the pandemic happened, and then I moved across the country, and I stopped performing. I stopped playing. I stopped doing improv. So I was like the improviser that wasn't improvising. And because my work has become my hobby, or my hobby has become my work, I should say, it's really hard for me, as you know, a lot of comedy happens at night, to work a full day, put my kid
Yeah.
to bed, and then be like, "I'm gonna go to rehearsal now or do a show." So I've decided to create play in my weekly life, and so I've created some sketch comedy characters that I do on Instagram. One of all I wrote a book as well, and so they're kind of I made them the brand ambassadors for my book, and they're fun and interesting. I've got a new one coming up, but I have a wig bin that I rotate through, and I just always like to incorporate some type of character work into some of my content online, and that's been really really fun. And then my son, he's got this wild imagination too. And so I'm going to be honest with you, playing pretend with him is hard for me. Like getting on the floor and him asking me to do cars and play all these different things that he's making up is hard. But I don't I've asked myself why that is, and I think it's because I think I'm not being productive, which is a whole other thing that I need to work through. So I've really set aside 20 minutes. I'll set a timer on my watch and I'm like, "Erin, you just need to play 20
Hmm.
minutes every day with him." And he loves it. It's his favorite part of the whole day. And then I start to love it after I sit there and do it for a while. But it's that part of me getting on the floor that I resist. But once I do it, I love it. So I do it in a variety of ways, but I really make sure to incorporate it in my life because what is life without it? And if I was an improviser who wasn't playing, like I wouldn't be aligning my truth with what I'm teaching.
Yeah. No, I think that like there's some truth there where, and I know your son's quite a bit younger than my daughters who are 9 and 12, but for me, there was like a switch that happened in like early to mid elementary school where I felt like I could say more, um, okay, I do want to play, but here's what I will enjoy also. And so if we're going to
Yeah.
play a board game, we're not going to play Candyland because I don't like Candyland. And you guys are welcome to play that with your friends. You can play those things with your friends. But let's find a board game that we all can enjoy. And so like recently we found this game called Cacao. And, it's sort of like one of those builder games where you're getting cacao plants and trading them in. And it's enjoyable as an adult, it's also enjoyable for the kids. Or like there's a Cards Against Humanity for like families, and it's like just inappropriate enough that they think it's hilarious, and it's entertaining. And so I think that whether it's that or like I want to go for a hike and I think we should be outside, and being able to kind of take back some of my parenting influence. Whereas when they were younger, yeah, it was just like they want to play with whatever, and they're really not going to do something else. So to me, that switch has been really kind of an exciting switch. I've also found, and tell me if this is something outside of your work that you do, but for me, that achiever side, or that like create like just wanting to create things side, doesn't just go away in my hobbies. And so starting our long form improv group, we named it Red Trillium. It's like a murder mystery where we ask the audience for a ridiculous murder weapon, and then we ask for a ridiculous place to get murdered, and then we make up like an hour long play, improvised scenes that all come together hopefully at the end. And so like last time it was they're killed by a microphone in a laser tag arena, and you can't strangle and you can't hit someone over the head with it, because that's like you can do that with any object. And so like to me, that's just like joining people in this kind of brain consciousness, and just saying, hey, our only goal is to surprise each other. Like, who cares if the audience comes along? Like, let's just try to make each other laugh and be surprised. Just to me becomes a playful outlet that doesn't involve my kids.
Oh, I love it. Yes, and and I will say one thing we created during the pandemic is something called laugh breaks. And so these are 20, 30, or 45-minute sessions on Zoom that teams can book literally on demand. Like you could book it in 2 days if you wanted it for your next Zoom meeting, where we do short form improv over Zoom. And the chat box and we use the chat box for laughs, we use the chat box for suggestions, but we are off mute as players. That has been really fun. That is my work, but that has
Mm,
been like the most joyful thing because we just get to do what we love, which is play. But I love that you've taken improv and run with it and are creating some outside of the box things for you. I've talked with one of my good friends about this, and he works in finance during the day. He did IO in Chicago, was on a Herald team for a long time, moved to Alabama with family to be closer to family, and he does improv, and he started this whole troupe, and he's started a mini theater and doing it at night. And I told him, I said, how are you finding the energy for this? He has 3 kids and a day job. And he goes, well, I don't have this creative outlet during the day. So I need this for me at night. And I think what has happened is that I turned my hobby into my career. And I need a new hobby. I need something to do,
yeah.
that is like is play. I meditate, I work out daily. I love to run, and that's not really play, it's more exercise, but I really have struggled when people ask me like what's your hobby? I couldn't tell you other than running and meditating. Like I that is something that I think I need to work on because I actually need a break from improv, which is funny. You asked me like, what are you sick of talking about? And I was like, improv, but I still love it to the root of who I am. It's just what I do all day long and talk about. So it's like, how can I put that into a different context for me is something I really want to work on. This is therapy
I
in
mean,
itself, though.
yeah, I was just gonna say, like, the therapist in me is like, don't be so hard on yourself. I mean, right now, like, you're raising a young one, and that's draining. And then even just figuring out lunches and dinners that are somewhat healthy, and keeping your budget together, and then running a business, and then like all these, and exercising. Amazing that you even exercise with all that going on. So it's like this phase for you, to me, is just like such a busy phase. Like, it gets better.
Oh, that's awesome to hear. Okay, well, thank you. And I tell myself that too because there is so much energy that you're outsourcing every day as a therapist, as a practitioner, as a facilitator, as a teacher. There's so much energy that you give, and I find myself at the end of the day being like, I haven't given to myself, so I need to. Like I'll read or I'll kind of relax on the couch and do something that is kind of numbs my brain for a minute just because I need to rejuvenate, and that I think is absolutely right. I am hard on myself, Joe. This is
Yeah.
therapy within the practice of the practice. Okay.
Well,
Thank you.
and I think I know for me, my kids when they were 3, they were pure three-nagers, like, they were terrible,
Yes.
and it was, like, the second they
Yes.
turned 4, it just started to get better, and it took me a couple years to realize, like, "Okay, it's getting better," and now that they're 9 and 12, it's like I'm in that sweet spot where they wanna cuddle, but they're still becoming, like, little women, but then there's times that they want their, like, buddies and cuddles, and it's just, like, the sweetest age, and I never thought middle school and late elementary would be one of my favorite ages, but it just is. I get to have these kids around. So, well,
I
Erin,
love it.
the last question I always ask is, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
I would want them to know that they are doing amazing work and that the world needs your light. And we also need you to rejuvenate your light. There's something called a lightsaber day, or LSD for short, that I talk about in my new book, and it's literally preventing burnout as light workers, as energy healers, as practitioners and therapists. You're giving of yourself all day long, and eventually that wick is going to burn down, but you can prevent that wick from dwindling by being proactive and giving a day to yourself that refuels you. I just did 2 lightsaber days myself on Friday and Monday over the long weekend we just had. And I got to tell you, I was in a really burnt out place prior to that. And I just did things that rejuvenated my soul. And it changed the way I showed up back at work yesterday, today. And so giving to yourself as much as you give to others is something I really want to just emphasize and drive home.
Mm, so awesome. Well, if people want to connect with you, if they want to connect with the work that you're doing, where should we send them?
Yes, it's ErinDiehl.com. It's Erin, Diehl.com, and that'll take you to my Instagram, LinkedIn. You can get the book, I See You, A Leader's Guide to Energizing Your Team Through Radical Empathy there. And I would love to hear from anybody on the show because I think you're doing such great work, Joe. Thank you for being an amazing host and giving space for everyone to listen and grow and learn from you.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Well, that laugh saver day, it just left my mind what she said right at the end there. But that made me think of lightsabers, which made me think it's May 2nd right now, and May the 4th is right around the corner. So, International Star Wars Day, or Intergalactic Star Wars Day, right around the corner here. Yeah, if you're a Star Wars fan, good day to you. And if not, then you should go watch them. Just finished the episode 9 with my girls recently. A couple years ago, you can find this actually on our Practice the Practice channel. My friend Paul and I did this intergalactic therapy training series where it's done in that like 1970s, like all the stuff we watched in grad school of those bad training videos. And he interviews Luke, who I dress up as, for a therapy session. And Luke has just met Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he's this older man that wants him to go away with him. And Paul is, talking to Luke about whether that's a smart decision, and whether how well does he know this man. And then in another episode, Darth Vader has just revealed to Luke that he was his father and wanted to invite him into the family business, and was rejected. And Luke attempted suicide by jumping off the bridge, in the Death Star, and that's really hard for Darth Vader. And a bunch of really funny, at least to me, they're funny, little shorts that my friend Paul and I did. So if you can find those on the web, feel free to search around on YouTube for those. We'll also try to link to some of those in the show notes as well. Also, we couldn't do this show and all of these shows without our amazing sponsors. Therapy Notes is our sponsor today. They're the best electronic health records out there. When you use promo code Joe, you're going to get a couple months for free. But even more, you're going to get the peace of mind. They're going to help you move over from whatever system you're on right now. I literally was just talking to my daughter's therapist, and she uses a different platform that I won't name. And it got hacked, and there's all these things that are wrong with it. That company was sold to a bigger company. The personalized customer service just isn't there. And Therapy Notes still owned by the same people. They're doing an amazing job. We have a direct pipeline to the head of marketing and the head of sales. So it's really awesome to help you on board with Therapy Notes. Just use promo code Joe at checkout to get those free months, but then they also know that their podcast dollars are working. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.